Yeah, alrighty. Rocking on into it. We are the RaceGuru Thunder Hour. I am your host for today, Sean Engel. You can find me on X or Twitter. I still prefer calling it Twitter. There at SeanE247. I'm pointing at it with my finger there. So that's how you can find me. And with me today, I have Mark Hogan again, the one and only DFS Marlin. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Appreciate you having me on. It's been a profitable week, so it was nice weekend in NASCAR. So looking forward to the last 2 weeks of the NASCAR season. We're coming down to the stretch here.
Oh yeah, right down to the wire there, Mark. So we got ourselves the last elimination race of the year for all three series coming up, and then we have the championship weekend at Phoenix. So it's going to be real exciting times, and the drama. Well, some say this is where the drama really peaks because this is the last chance. It's do or go home for a bunch of drivers this season.
Yeah, we're going to see some aggressive driving, I think, for sure. We're going to see some guys going after that top spot, looking to just outright win the race to squeeze their way into the championship four. So I think it's going to be an interesting I think this race is going to play out very interesting, and we're going to have some drama towards the end for sure.
Oh, definitely. We've seen it in the past there when, like 2020, for example, when Harvick was eliminated at this very race. Kevin Harvick there, and he won probably the most races that year and was seen as the favorite to win. And then he falls short and he tries to dive bomb Kyle Busch going for it, spins himself out in the process, and then gets eliminated that way. I mean, you get a lot of dramatic moments like that at Martinsville, and that's exactly what NASCAR wants. But we are a part of FantasyGuru.com, and with FantasyGuru.com, we cover a lot of sports there, not just NASCAR. You can get like the Game Time MVP all-in package, which gets you NBA, NHL, college sports, PGA, MMA, soccer, and racing, all for just one price there. $200 for the Game Time MVP all-in. Or you can get the MVP Platinum or all-in packages, which gets you every sport, including those I just named, plus MLB, and plus the football there, which football and MLB, those are the bread and butter of Fantasy Guru right there. But hey, we also have a promo going on too. If you use the code BOO, like BOO, because it's Halloween, you get $100 off of DFS, betting, or all-in NFL packages from FantasyGuru.com. There's not a lot of time where you can use this specific promo code, so go in there, get that right now. Get yourself the NFL packages for the rest of the year, and you'll start winning a lot of money today. So that's that, and be sure to also hit up support at FantasyGuru.com for any of the best possible potential deals for any of our packages and then some. So, Mark, we got ourselves 2 more weeks, as we mentioned here, but before we get on into it, how about we recap this past weekend at Homestead? There's a lot certainly to talk about. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah. Lots of racing. I mean, we had trucks, we had Xfinity, we had Cup, lots of drama in a lot of those races. So a lot to unpack, and, a few elements of those races to take away for future DFS slates as well.
Oh, certainly, for sure. Let's get right on into it and talk about the Truck Series race there. So Grant Enfinger, he outlasted the field on fuel in order to win at Homestead. He wins his second race in a row for the year. He beat out Ty Majeski, Connor Mosack, Corey Heim, who was the dominant driver of the day, and Tyler Ankrum. That was the top 5. And I got to say, Mark, you mentioned about it in the Discord channel there. We have our NASCAR DFS Discord channels where we discuss things like this and share lineups, tips, give ourselves the best fighting chance we can win in order to go and play DFS every week. You had a really great lineup there for the trucks this past week. So tell us all about it and give us your synopsis on the top 5 here.
Yeah, I posted my lineup before the race just for everyone to take a look at, and then ended up knocking down a contest, a 33-person contest. It was a $121 entry, won $900 off of it. So certainly profitable. We had I said my going into this weekend on the on this show last week, I was going to do a 1-2-3 approach where I did 1 dominator on the first race, 2 on the second, and 3 on the third. I ended up going 2 here. I just felt like it was too hard to stray away from Hyman Majeski. So I rostered those 2. I had Rhodes, Friesen, Daniel Dye, and Matt Crafton. A couple of things to break down there is I wasn't even cashing until Riggs, Sanchez all ran out of fuel. I think Anfinger did too, right? So a lot of those.
Well, if he did, he wouldn't have won the race.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry. The other 2, they ran out of. Well, I think he did after he crossed the finish line, wasn't it? Or maybe not. I think
No.
he was out still. Yeah, it almost, I couldn't believe actually he didn't run out of fuel. But the other 2 did, who were on the same strategy, and that took me from not cashing all the way to first on the final lap. So lots of drama in that race. That was super cool. We had some place differential come out of it as well. Matt Crafton moved up from 22nd to 11th. I rostered a couple guys that held position. Daniel Dye started in 7th, finished in 7th. That was enough to help knock down that lineup. And just incremental place differential. The biggest takeaway I would say is Crafton started 22nd. He was my biggest mover. Everyone else that I rostered was within the top 20, including Hyman Majeski, who were my top, plays. Ultimately, when you're looking at a race with less laps, you don't have to necessarily worry about as many laps recorded. You still have to keep it in mind. But at the end of the day, just making sure you have good track position in a shorter race is going to be incredibly helpful as well.
Oh, definitely, for sure. And we noticed this in the Xfinity race as well, but there actually wasn't a big amount of movement for place differential compared to other weeks within both the truck and Xfinity races in particular. And we'll get into more detail about that in a second. But it's very interesting because a lot of the drivers, they finished exactly where you expected them to around their starting positions. Some moved up a little bit, some dropped back a little bit, but ultimately you'd say what the difference was just getting those laps led and then just pure finishing position. That's what really mattered.
Oh, 100%. And, I think it's also one thing to note is maybe there's less parity when it comes to a trucks race versus a cups race, just because there's a wider gap between the top drivers and the top cars versus the bottom. So I feel like in a trucks race, you don't have to take as many shots on some of those contrarian low end price plays. It's more about just getting those raw points and getting guys that are going to project pretty well in general. Maybe not the cheapest options by any means.
True. That's a good point made there. Assessing the playoff drivers within this Truck Series race, they had a really strong day. Grant Enfinger, he won. He was already locked in, so he just basically prevented the rest of the field from getting a win and moving on. But Ty Majeski, who was in your lineup there, he finished second. Then Corey Heim, who was also in your lineup, and he was the dominant truck of the day, he finished fourth. And then Tyler Ankrum, he finished fifth. Raja Caruth was eighth. Christian Eckes was ninth. Taylor Gray was 10th. And the lowest finishing one of the entire playoff field was Nick Sanchez in 13th. So really, all 8 of the playoff drivers had really strong results.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think we talked about it last week and really the last couple weeks is ideally we want to target these playoff drivers because there's a reason why they're in the playoffs and they're typically going to be pushing towards the top. So going after some of these guys who are expected to finish towards the top is certainly a good strategy.
Definitely, for sure. Let's get into the top place differential plays of the week for the trucks here. Gaining 13 positions, the top earner was Tanner Gray. He started 33rd and finished in the 20th spot. Then after that, you mentioned him before. It was Matt Crafton. He gained 11 spots from 22nd to finish 11th. Then Tyler Ankrum, he gained 10 positions, starting from 15th, going all the way to 5th. And as for the worst place differential place for the trucks, Bailey Curry, he started 11th, finished 31st. Matt Mills, he started 24th and finished 34th after getting wrecked out of the race. And then losing 9 positions with 3 different drivers. Nick Sanchez, who started 4th and finished 13th. Lane Riggs, who started 13th and finished 22nd. Both of those drivers ran out of fuel and did not make that strategy work. And then there was Chase Purdy, who started 17th and finished in the 26th position there, Mark.
I forgot what happened to Chase Purdy in this race. But that seemed a little surprising to me at the end.
Yeah. He just did not have the best day ultimately overall, unfortunately. And we've said it all year with Chase Purdy. He's very boomer bust, you could say, because he has some weeks where he ends up being a pretty good DFS performer, and he has weeks like this where he just disappoints.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Lane Riggs was kind of a thorn in the side there for a lot of lineups. I think he also commanded some pretty high ownership. So I think that was really a difference maker in seeing him drop there. So
yeah, truly, especially with how much of a hot streak he's been on since the truck playoffs began too.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Now, getting into the stage winners, Corey Heim, he won the first stage of the race. Grant Enfinger, he won the second stage. Lap leaders, Corey Heim led the most with 68 laps led. Grant Enfinger led 32, followed by Lane Riggs with 27. And then Taylor Gray led 4, and then Christian Eckes led 3. Is there any other notes to take away from the truck race before we move on and cover Xfinity here, Mark? We have the big list of finishers right here.
Yeah, just really appreciate the consistency I felt like we've seen from Friesen and Daniel Dye this year. That was the reason why I went after those 2 drivers in my lineup. I mean, really, Crafton just stuck out like a sore thumb with where he qualified at. So I'm not surprised to have seen him move up that many spots, even Ben Rhodes. But yeah, Friesen and Dye, that was the remaining build out of my lineup, and it's not like I asked them to do anything crazy, but they just kind of held their positions. Friesen moved up 6 spots, but went from 12th to 6th, and that's typically where we expect him, amongst this group here. So those are some of the plays that I think a lot of people weren't necessarily looking at that we have to keep in mind for a shorter race like this.
Truly. The one other name that does stick out to me within the list of finishers is Caden Honeycutt. He finished 14th. He's usually been one of the top performers of the year whenever he's hopped into that Nice Motorsports truck, and then he only finished 14th. So there was a little bit more expectation that he'd perform a little bit better, but he didn't perform terribly either this past weekend, you could say too.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. He's someone to watch, on some future races as well.
Yeah, I especially when next year's truck season hits and he's going to be a full-time driver, so he's going to be eligible for the playoffs then, and that's going to be very fun to watch.
I agree.
Now let's get into the Xfinity Series race here. We had Austin Hill winning at Homestead with conviction over Cole Custer, Eric Almirola, Jesse Love, and Sheldon Creed. So first thoughts there, Mark, with Austin Hill winning over those drivers. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty upset with myself because I don't think I wrote him up amongst my top price plays, although he was on my radar. I did, I think 5 or 6 entries in this race. I ended up breaking even, and he was in 40% of my lineups. But he went from 16th to 1st. I mean, he won both stages. Benefited from that late stage 2 caution, so that he kind of was in the right place at the right time as well. Di Benedetto, I mean, he was chalk starting from the back. I thought that was interesting, but he had that engine issue. So just keep in mind, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but Di Benedetto, he started 38th, and I think 80% of the field rostered him because of the fact that, and I wrote him up because there's no, that you have to give attention to a guy like that, who's going to, start from the back because they decided to swap out engines, whatever the case was. And typically we like to target those spots, but if you're trying to get different, ownership on a guy like that is going to be out of control. So I did have some lineups where I didn't play him, and it worked out great because he ended up having a mechanical issue, not able to finish the race. 80% of lineups wiped out in result. So I just be careful. Sometimes you have these layup chalky plays. Don't go all in on it. Make sure you have a little bit of exposure if you're going to do multiple lineups where you don't roster it so you can get leverage on everyone if something does happen to a guy like that when he's working his way up to the pack. Sometimes it's not even their fault. They're just in the wrong place at the wrong time and they're working through a bunch of traffic.
Yeah, and you know what? It's like what I've said. That's one of our golden rules about NASCAR DFS. You never, ever want to go 100% all in on any one single driver on any given weekend, no matter what the circumstances are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, just at any race, they can be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And the crazy thing is, and we've mentioned it on this particular podcast before too. Even if you do have that driver rostered, you could still cash out with them, even if they have a bad day too. Because then, if everybody else is going to be using them, then where you get different is ultimately what matters in the end too.
Depends on your goal. If you're looking at a large tournament, you're out. But if it's a small tournament, maybe a 20-person, a 30-person, something like that, you could totally even still knock the whole thing down. So I think it just depends on contest selection for sure. But absolutely, a guy that high owns, you're not completely dead if it's a small contest.
Truly, truly. Good point you brought up there with the contest selection. Contest selection matters in NASCAR so much.
It matters in everything. I mean, NBA, NFL, you name it. And it has to align just with whatever your DFS strategy is. What's your goal? What are you trying to win when you enter this contest? Are you trying to win $50,000? Or are you trying to double up your money and win 20? So that really dictates how you're going to set up your lineup.
Truly, 100% agree. You know what? Let's get into the playoff driver performances here because this was also very interesting regarding this race. We mentioned about Austin Hill. He won. He finished ahead of Cole Custer there. So Custer was second. Jesse Love, Hill's teammate at Richard Childress Racing. Great day for RCR in the Xfinity Series this past weekend. He finished fourth. Justin Allgaier finished in the 8th position with his teammate Sam Mayer behind him in 9th. And then AJ Allmendinger, he snuck into the top 10 there with that 10th position run. And then following that is Chandler Smith in 13th. And then Sammy Smith just disappointed once again, finishing 22nd there. 6 of the 8 playoff drivers finish inside the top 10. What would you say is your synopsis of these playoff drivers from Homestead here, Mark?
Well, Sammy Smith is do or die at this point. He's down 95 points. I would say Sam Marin, really spots 5 through 8, the guys that are all in the bubble here, they all need big races. They're probably all going for a win. So out of these 4, if I had to bank on one of them, oh man, going into this week, I don't mind taking a rookie and like a Jesse Love or something like that. But yeah,
if you told me to pick one of the bubble drivers that they would have to go out and win, I'll be honest with you. I think really the call might be Chandler Smith.
Yeah, I think that's the safest play. I feel weird about Toyotas this week. That's my only thing. I don't know. And then, it's interesting to see the, only one Ford in this entire group, Cole Custer. Everyone else we've got Chevys dominating the pack here outside of that.
And Chandler is the only Toyota driver left in the Xfinity playoffs there too. Chevy's got 6 of the 8 playoff drivers.
Yeah, they're dominating right now. So, it's Cole Custer and Chandler. I think Chandler Smith is probably going to, I don't mind that call at all amongst those 4.
Yeah, especially because the thing is, too, is that Chandler, he excels a little bit more at the shorter tracks compared to the other track types, too. He even won on Richmond twice before in the Xfinity Series, including earlier in the year. So I got to say that I think if you want a driver on the shorter tracks in order to go out there and win, I'm going to say Chandler, especially given his situation with his NASCAR career, too. Do or die. He said it himself when he was interviewed by Fox Sports Bob Pockrass that he's not going to give any craps.
He's been racing well. I like the call. I think that's definitely a spot to dissect a little bit more. And might maybe make some bets on that going into this weekend as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Okay, so let's get into our place differential plays of the week there. We already mentioned the top one, of course, a couple of times, and that was Austin Hill. He gained 15 positions, started 16th, finished in the first position. Then gaining 10 positions was two drivers, Jesse Love, who started 14th and finished 4th, and then Ryan Sieg, who started 17th and finished 7th. So top 10 runs for both of them right there. And then gaining 8 positions, yeah, when you gain 8 positions and call that the most, you know there was not a lot of place differential movement this week. Shane Van Gisbergen, he started 25th and finished inside the 17th position there, Mark.
And SVG was very high owned. I think we're talking about 70% of lineups had SVG in it. So, that was a great way to get different if you wanted to go elsewhere and not play SVG, but it was a good play even if you did. I mean, it didn't kill you if you played him. It didn't kill you if you didn't. You just had to get creative elsewhere. Austin Hill and Jesse Love, I mean, we got two teammates in the playoffs, so I think that's the biggest takeaway out of this group. And, they were working together, I think, in a few different spots. And Jesse Love had a few, hit a few challenges at the beginning of this race, but I think basically, his crew chief calming him down and basically comparing his race to Austin Hill almost kind of helped him learn on the fly too. So I thought that was a very interesting element of this race.
Truly, 100%. Getting into the worst place differential plays of the week. Well, normally we usually list 3 different positions, but I'm only listing one number of positions lost because 4 drivers were tied for it. Losing 12 positions was William Sawalich, who started 12th, finished 24th in his debut. Parker Retzlaff, who started 11th and finished 23rd. Sammy Smith, who started 10th and finished 22nd. And then Chandler Smith, who started on the pole and finished 13th. Now, all 4 of these drivers lost 12 positions there. And then, really, there was not a lot of place differential loss in this race altogether outside of those 4 because the next furthest down you have to get to, as far as positions loss is concerned, is 5 positions lost. So there was not a lot of loss in this race there, Mark.
It was not. It was you're splitting hairs at the top, with who got the laps led here. And I was looking for, I need to go back and look up the fastest laps for this race because I think that was spread out a little bit differently than laps led. But really, Hill and Custer, pretty much dominated. On paper, it looks like Hill completely dominated, but it was a little bit closer than that, I would say, if watching it real time in the race.
Yeah, I'd say so for sure. Speaking of lap leaders, let's get into that too. Austin Hill, he led 82 laps, while Custer, he led 67, followed by Chandler Smith leading 29 laps. Sheldon Creed led 12. AJ Allmendinger led 9, and then Eric Almirola led 1 single lap. We have our list of finishers here as well for the rest of the field that we didn't cover. Let's give our final thoughts as we call out some finishers here, Mark. How about it?
Well, I thought Riley Herbst was really interesting because middle of stage 2, he had an issue and he went a lap down and then he moved all the way back up to 6. So I think that was what I was referenced. That's what I was thinking of when it came to fastest laps. I think Herbst recorded a lot of fastest laps there at one point. Kligerman had some good place differential, I believe, as well. So, and then some of these other guys, Clements, Poole, those are guys that I've enjoyed rostering here. Was also on Ryan Ellis. I don't think he moved up many spots, but at his price point, I think he ended up paying off. So,
Yep.
this was an interesting race, but we were really splitting hairs between the people that cashed and the people that didn't. So it was quite the nail biter here, given how close everything was.
Truly. You mentioned Ryan Ellis there. He started from the 31st position. He went all the way up to 25th, so he gained 6 spots there. That paid off pretty nicely. Connor Zilich also shouting him out. He finished 12th in that Junior Motorsports number 88 car. He gained positive place differential of 1 spot. I mean, it counts. It's something, but pretty decent finish there for what's going to be an Xfinity Series rookie next year. And as for a lot of the other drivers, they pretty much placed right where you expected, I'd say.
Oh yeah, yep. No other surprises outside of what we've already mentioned. I'm thinking.
So on that note, let's talk our way through the Cup race. And you know what, Mark? Don't you just love Homestead? I mean, seriously.
Oh yeah, very competitive racing, very entertaining to watch. Lots of drama at the end. I mean, drama right from the beginning too, with the wreck on the first lap, I think, with Haley. So, man, there was a lot to unpack in this race, and lots of fun, fast driving. I think we talked about it before the show started, but this is the type of race that can capture new NASCAR fans. So, love to see more races like this.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah. I miss it when they used to run Homestead as the championship race instead of Phoenix, because Homestead was the perfect race to host a finale. Now you see why.
Well, oh yeah. I mean, the way that final lap played out, I couldn't even believe that Blaney let Reddick pass him there. But um, it's hard to keep track of a guy in your rearview mirror, and sometimes we were talking about it. Sometimes it's a mental game more than anything else. And ultimately, these drivers are human beings, and there's human error involved here. So. It was unfortunate to see him give up the top to Reddick, but Reddick shot through that like a cannon and took the lead right at the end.
Yeah, I think the thing that was impressive about Reddick was that he began that white flag lap in the third position. Through one pair of corners, he got by Denny Hamlin right there on the bottom. And then through that final pair of corners, that he got by Blaney there. He was just mounting a charge, and he won in the clutch over those two. And he also beat out Christopher Bell, who was in fourth, and then Chase Elliott, who was in fifth there.
There were a lot of interesting restarts. I remember there was one restart. I think it was I want to say Bubba Wallace just shot through the middle of the entire pack at one point.
3 wide right there for the lead.
I mean, so some of the restarts were just these guys were coming out just guns ablazing, firing through the whole pack, and no regard to whoever's on either side on either door. So I don't know. That was fun, especially the restarts.
It feels nice to talk about a race that actually ended up good and didn't have to deal with the usual NASCAR BS that we've been dealing with for a lot of the weeks so far this year. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're not talking about a caution light at the last possible second to not send it to overtime or to send it to overtime, things like that. I mean, it was a pretty clean race, I would say.
yes. But it wasn't really a clean race for Kyle Larson. In fact, you could say it was a roller coaster. He had a flat tire, fell back in the field, spent the second stage trying to catch up. Then he had a good enough car to compete for the win in the final stage. Then he spun himself out going for the lead. And he only lost one position when he spun to Hamlin, but then he had a slow pit stop, and that pretty much just stopped him in his tracks, and he ended up finishing 13th. What a way to go through a race there, Mark, huh?
Yeah, the pit stop really. I think he dropped 6 positions when he for the pit stop. So that's what really killed him. He probably wouldn't even have finished the race if he was further in the middle of the track and not on the wall when he got that right rear flat at the beginning of the race. So because if it would have, I think they were talking about in the broadcast, but if it would have gone out and he was 5 or 6 car lengths, further away from the wall, he would have shot right into the wall there, and his car would have been wrecked. So he kind of got lucky there, even at the beginning. But just goes to show how well he can, sift through traffic to have made his way back up. So, I think it's a good recency bias opportunity going into this weekend. You get a guy that just burnt a lot of people. He's a very aggressive driver. Guess what? We're going to see a lot of aggressive drivers, a lot of aggressive driving going into this race, I would say. And who's more used to driving aggressively than Kyle Larson? And I would say probably no one else. I don't mind taking a shot on Larson in any capacity going into this upcoming race too.
Oh, 100%. This is good. That's part of the reason why it's going to be exciting to watch. We have never seen Kyle Larson below the cutoff line all year long until this very race. So what can I say? What can I say? It's going to be interesting. Let's get into the playoff driver performances here. Speaking of the playoffs, Tyler Reddick in first, Ryan Blaney in second, Denny Hamlin in third, Christopher Bell in fourth, Chase Elliott in fifth, William Byron sixth, the aforementioned Larson in 13th, and then, well, the only one who was locked into the next round until Reddick won was Joey Logano, and he kind of went out to lunch on this race. He finished 28th there.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see, he's starting to gear up now. So, and this is a track coming up this weekend where he's pretty good. So, we'll probably see Logano have a nice bounce back performance. Blaney's ticked off. I would imagine, giving up that race on the final lap there, he's going to be coming out with a vengeance going into this track. So, we got to look at recency bias. We got to look at the guys that burnt a lot of DFS players to try and find those leverage opportunities, those low ownership drivers here.
Oh, totally. What was interesting, they mentioned it on the broadcast regarding the playoffs, was that first through fourth on the final restart were the four guys that were below the cutoff line there, Mark. And we ended up with the top six all being playoff drivers. You don't usually see that every day.
No, I mean, that was intense. So just imagine if, there was a massive wreck or anything like that. I mean, we could be looking at a completely different scenario here. So it was interesting to see how it played out.
Oh, for sure. Let's get into the place differential plays of the week. Now, this first one, the one who got the most, I am 100% owning this one because I called him out last week on this very show, and I said, you've got to use him. Ryan Preece, he came on through. He ended up getting 25 positions, starting 35th, finishing in the 10th position. Great day for him. He basically won you cash if you used them, as well as AJ Allmendinger, who gained 24 positions there. We also mentioned him last week. He finished in the 8th position after starting 32nd. William Byron, he gained 21 positions there. I wrote him up in the article this week. He started 25th and finished 6th. And then Ryan Blaney, he gained 18 positions, starting 20th and finished in the 2nd position. And as for the worst place differential plays of the week, well, Justin Haley, he just could not catch a break in this race there. He lost 24 positions after starting 10th. A great qualifying run, ends up leading to 34th. Bad day for him. Then there was Ty Gibbs, who lost 22 positions there. He started 14th, finished 36th after he lost a gear in his transmission. So transmission problems hampered him. And then losing 20 positions was Daniel Hemrick. He started 9th, finished in the 29th position there, Mark.
Yeah, Haley, obviously, I'm sure was disappointing for a lot of people. And then, you called it with Preece. You were talking him up a ton. We were on Allmendinger. This is a classic example, though, of everyone ran the same track in all of these races, much different DFS results. So it's one thing to keep in mind is the way when you're approaching, if you got 3 races coming up on a weekend, even though the track is completely the same, the number of laps matters. The group matters. There's a lot of variables that go into play that's going to dictate how you approach the DFS slate. You can't just look at all 3 races and treat them exactly the same. This is a prime example why. It's like the Xfinity race. I think the biggest place differential we just talked about was like +9 or so, or -9 as far as the worst drivers. I forget if that was Xfinity or trucks. But then you're looking at Cup, and you've got guys going from 25th to 6 and 35th to 10. So
it's very different. Like mentioned earlier, the truck and Xfinity races did not have a lot of gains or loss, but the Cup race totally did, 100%.
Yeah.
Now, getting into the stage winners right here, Tyler Reddick, he did win the first stage, while Denny Hamlin won the second. And then Tyler Reddick, he ended up leading the most laps as well. He led 97, followed by Chase Elliott at 81, Ryan Blaney at 47, Denny Hamlin at 21, Brad Keselowski at 8, Kyle Busch at 5, Christopher Bell at 3, Bubba Wallace with 2, and then Kyle Larson, Todd Gilliland, and Justin Haley all led 1 lap. I guess Haley had a victory to find somewhere in the day by leading that one singular lap. Getting into the other finishers for this week's race, a lot of interesting names there. Alex Bowman finished in the 7th position. Good run for him. How about Carson Hocevar getting a top 10 this week in the 9th position there, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, what rookie of the year? Can we say that about him for the Cup Series?
It's all but certain at this point because I don't see how Josh Berry is going to be able to catch him.
It's going to be a guy that, going into next year, we're going to have to consider rostering more and more frequently. So he's definitely staying on the radar and probably going to make it more into my lineups going into next season.
100%. Speaking of Josh Berry, he did actually finish in the 11th position there, so he had a decent run actually this time around. He needed one of those since he's been struggling over the past month or two. Chase Briscoe, he ended up finishing in 12th. Michael McDowell ended up gaining 10 positions from his starting position, finished 14th. Chris Buescher 15th, Daniel Suarez 16th, Brad Kay 17th. Bubba, man, he fell all the way back to 18th there, Mark.
Yeah, unfortunate for Bubba Wallace. I don't know how much I looked at him. I think we talked him up a little bit. Daniel Suarez, I think I had some interest in him. And JHN, John Hunter Nemechek, pretty disappointing year. Zane Smith, too, all the way back in the 30th spot. I thought maybe we would get a little bit more of a stronger performance out of him as well. And then Ross Chastain, all the way in the 33rd spot. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he just did not have it today. Not at all.
Not really crushing any watermelons anytime soon, I would imagine.
Nope. Who knows if we're going to see any more watermelons? Well, maybe we could see it at Phoenix, perhaps, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Maybe not this year.
Maybe not. Well, let's get into our news stories for the week here because that's all we really have to say. Well, almost everything that we have to say regarding the entire weekend because we got penalties, Mark. We got big penalties to talk about. Let's get the big one out of the way here. Connor Jones from the Truck Series, he is suspended one race for intentionally wrecking Matt Mills in the Truck Series race at Homestead. Johnny Sauter, who is a former truck champion, he was originally going to drive the Hattori Racing number 16, is going to drive in this place in the number 66 Ford for Thor Sport Racing. And then apparently Landon Lewis is going to be driving the number 16 for Hattori instead there. Now, this whole penalty, we saw it in the truck race pretty much straight up. He ran right into the back of Matt Mills there, Connor Jones. And after that, we heard that big, angry radio communication right there. He said he was tired of being pushed around all year by him. And then that's basically just an admission that he just straight up dumped him right there, Mark. So in my opinion, this penalty is pretty much deserved.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's really any place for that in NASCAR. So, like you said, the audio coming out of his car seemed to indicate that it was intentional. It looked intentional. I agree. I have no issue with the penalty here.
100%. Just because also Matt Mills, he spent 2 nights in the hospital after that race for further evaluation. And although thankfully doctors cleared him, he was able to get out and everything. So he is going to go back to racing again this week at Martinsville, but still, having payback come at a track like Homestead where it's more of a high-speed track rather than, like, say, at Martinsville where you're less likely in order to injure somebody, that's not right in the head. Not a good call.
No, I agree. Not cool. I didn't even realize that he was in the hospital. So, but yeah, it was just weird, just how the attitude towards it too that came from him. I don't think it's a good sign for him in the long term.
Yeah, and apparently, according to other drivers, he's always been like this. Brasha Carruth, for example, he admitted since he was racing with Connor Jones since the Legends Cars days when they were even younger than they are now, that he's always had a big temper, big angry streak behind him, and he just doesn't know how to control himself. And I just think that if you don't know how to control your emotions and then you're going to take it out on drivers like that and cause danger, that you don't have a place for that in NASCAR. See, you got to go back to the lower series and learn, mature up a little.
100%.
now that we're past that here, that was not the only penalty that was notable from this past weekend here, Mark. We got another truck penalty that'll actually affect this week's race as well, with the number 38 Front Row Motorsports team, that's Lane Riggs' team, was fined 10 driver and owner points, while crew chief Dylan Capello will be suspended for one race due to an L1 penalty for improperly mounted ballast. So FRM Performance Director Johnny Roten will be the crew chief for Lane Riggs this week. So different crew chief for Lane Riggs. That could potentially affect the performance of the team itself. So something to keep in mind for the truck race this coming week, Mark.
Yeah, especially for trucks too, when you get a lot of DFS players that are just going to be looking at the numbers and the odds and everything else. This is an important piece of news to take away and maybe utilize to fade, a driver that might otherwise command some decent ownership.
Truly, because you know what they say, driver crew chief chemistry is everything in this sport. So if you don't have the right voice behind your ear, the right crew chief that understands the car or how it works behind you and can make those adjustments on the fly for pit stops, yeah, that's not going to work out well. And that's something we have to keep in mind ultimately.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Getting into the rest of the penalties, there were just a bunch of lug nut penalties there for Sam Mayer's team. Marty Lindley got fined $5,000, as well as Andy Street, the crew chief of Austin Hill's team, and Joe Williams, who was the crew chief of Ryan Sieg's team. They all got fined $5,000 for having one loose lug nut after the race is completed at the end of the Xfinity Series. And then there was one Truck Series lug nut penalty as well for Raja Guru's team. So that his crew chief, Charles Walter, got fined $2,500 as well there, Mark. So that's the lug nut penalties there. That concludes the penalty report. Let's get into the next piece of news. So Brett Holmes Racing, they closed down during this past week, but then they were bought out by Chris Hedinger, and now they'll be rebranded as Hedinger Racing. So now Brett Holmes is no longer driving the truck. Instead, we have Brett Moffitt in the truck, he's a former Truck Series champion, so that's big and notable. We know that he's a talented driver. He's going to drive that Ford truck for the rest of the year in the Truck Series. So it's going to be similar level equipment of what Brett Holmes has been driving this season. Different number. It's going to be number 4. We got ourselves probably a more talented driver than Brett Holmes as well. So this is big in order to keep an eye on too, Mark. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if we're looking at next year, do you think the rebranding, the buyout indicates better equipment going into next season? That's going to be my question.
Well, they just completely bought out the assets of Brett Holmes Racing. So whatever we see with the 32 this year, I think is what we're seeing with the 4 here. And we don't even know if Brett Moffitt's going to be the driver of this truck going into next year as well. So that's technically another open seat available for a driver to scoop up, unless they do name Moffitt as that driver next year.
So that's a TBD one, it sounds like, for me.
Yeah, something that we'll have to keep an eye on during the offseason overall. Other things to keep an eye on. We got some new crew chief signings confirmed. Excuse me if I screw up this name, but Charles Denick, he's going to be the new crew chief for Bubba Wallace's number 23 team next year in the Cup Series. So Bubba's getting a new crew chief. His current crew chief is going to be moving up to a competition role in 2311 Racing to oversee both cars instead. So I think this is a very interesting move overall, because really the crew chief, that Booty Barker, his current crew chief, he knew how to prepare the cars in order to make them fast, but sometimes the pit crew would have issues on pit road, and sometimes there would just be struggles for Bubba to keep up with the adjustments to the track conditions over the course of an entire race. So this is pretty interesting to watch as well. And I also think it's also notable that this new crew chief, he's the current crew chief of Christian Eckes in the number 19 team in the Truck Series as well, Mark. So we got a truck crew chief going up into Cup. What are your thoughts on this?
I think, obviously a level of promotion. So I think it's a positive thing, right? I think they're trying to elevate Bubba Wallace's spot, and with 2311 moving up on that front, I think this is a really interesting race upcoming for Bubba Wallace too. It almost seems like that team is in a spot where they're going to invest a lot of their time and energy to get him a good finish this race. So, it seems like one of those scenarios where this seems like positive news to me. It could go along with some positive news coming out of this weekend to get a lot of great momentum going into closing out this year and looking ahead towards next season. I like
Yeah,
it.
I think it. I think considering we've seen this kind of move before. Rudy Fugel, who's William Byron's current crew chief, also used to be a Truck Series crew chief before he got promoted up and snagged by Hendrick Motorsports to crew chief, that number 24 team. So there's already precedent in place where this could potentially work. So something we have to see next year. Booty Barker is still going to crew chief for Bubba until the end of the year, until the crew chief change will go into effect for next season. So that's
Yeah, it just seems like a promotion. I don't think it's anything negative, really across the board to me. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it works out for them.
Yeah, we shall see. As we shall see if a new crew chief move will work out for Josh Berry, because he's moving over to Wood Brothers Racing next year. And the crew chief has officially been named. It is Miles Stanley. He is an engineer for Team Penske and for Wood Brothers Racing, who's now going to get his chance to be a full-time crew chief for that number 21 entry. This number 21 car. We know it's currently driven by Harrison Burton. Jeremy Bullins is crew chiefing on it. Bullins is leaving at the end of the year for another team to be named later. So this whole 21 team is going to have a different look next year, and that's going to be very interesting to watch. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a track record. This crew chief has a track record with Blaney, I want to say. I think there's definitely it's probably an upgrade to some sort. Obviously, Josh Berry is looking to have a better season, so this is the right type of move on that front. Now, I guess the question is, okay, so it looks like the first race will be just at the Clash, so we're not looking at any kind of change going into this weekend, but again, just another driver with positive news. Maybe they're trying to close it out with some positive news going into this race to look ahead with some positive momentum for next season.
True. I think what's going to be very interesting is the engineering experience that Miles Stanley is going to bring to that number 21 team next year, because he was the engineer for Joey Logano's team for quite a few years there, and then eventually worked with Blaney, and then even did some crew chief work by being the crew chief for Austin Cindric when he ran part-time in the Cup Series before he moved to a full-time role. So he already has some experience with working with the Team Penske fold. So it's going to be real interesting to see. What's also going to be interesting is to see what might happen with Chandler Smith, because he admitted that he is uncertain about his NASCAR future after this year. He was interviewed by reporters after the race this past weekend where he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going to go. He doesn't know where there's like any seats available that doesn't require a big cash in order to check in order to go and get that seat or anywhere. And then he said that he might be working for his father's construction company instead, perhaps. So could this be the last of Chandler Smith these next 2 weeks, Mark?
I think we're going to find out this weekend. That's the exciting thing. Look, I love a good narrative. I think this is definitely one of the narratives to target here. So we talked about it earlier, and just the more and more I think about this, the more and more I'm interested in putting my chips in the middle of the table with Chandler Smith, watching him have a big race, maybe get a win, and then maybe shortly hearing some news about 2025 thereafter.
Yeah, because the whole thing is, even too, within the whole silly season conversation, his name has not been mentioned in a lot of places at all. So makes you wonder.
He's a good driver too.
Yeah, he's won some Xfinity races. He's won his fair share of Truck Series races. He took that chance on himself this year after leaving Colleague Racing on a 3-year deal in order to just do 1 year with Gibbs, bought out the contract. And although he's in position in order to basically be a competitor in order to maybe potentially go for the championship if he wins this weekend. It's been quite a road for him.
We'll see. I love it, though. I think it's a good narrative. He has a real chance at winning this race, so giddy up.
Now, let's close out the news stories with the silly season rumor that's been going on. There's been a lot of rumored discussion online about John Hunter Nemechek apparently being out at the end of the year at Legacy Motor Club from the 42 car. So there's been conflicting reports. Some say he's staying for at least one more year. There's others, people online that have been saying that, oh, he's probably going to be out of the car due to a lack of results this season. And then the other rumor is that if he ends up leaving this team, Rich Mileto might finally get his wish and see Corey Heim in the Cup car full time. So
that's been the rumor, and I was trying to catch up on some of the conversation on our chat, but earlier today, but it almost seems like maybe John Hunter Nemechek might not be the easiest driver to work with. Who knows? I think there's probably a lot that's gonna, get exposed over these next couple of weeks, even about this story. But I can't imagine. I mean, there's a lot of people kind of debunking some of these rumors, but when there's smoke, there's fire, and just kind of how the season's played out for John Hunter Nemechek is in line with a rumor like this. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of level of credibility here.
yeah, especially when you consider the fact that out of all the full-time drivers this year, well, you could probably scratch maybe Harrison Burton because he got that win and made the playoffs as a result of it. But other than that, John Hunter's been the worst performing driver of the year as far as points are concerned, and he has an average finish of 25.1. Not even any top fives this year, 4 top 10 finishes, 7 top 20 finishes. Not a lot of great stats overall this year, Mark.
He was really good in Xfinity previously. So, I mean, we're talking Corey Heim success, right? If you're comparing it to Corey Heim and trucks. So, yeah, I'm just curious what the details are behind this, what didn't work with him in that team, or what hasn't been working. But I don't think it's very positive at all here for John Hunter Nemechek.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know if this is true or not. This is just a rumor to be discussed around, but it isn't exactly 100% far-fetched considering how many different aspects of Legacy Motor Club, or the soccer club, if you still want to call them that, has been changed around this season alone, just through crew chiefs and personnel changes. It's been absolutely bonkers over there.
And not good results. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, Eric Jones, who signed a multi-year deal for the 43 car for earlier in the season, he's not doing too much better than John Hunter is this year.
Oh.
All right, now let's get into the preview for this week's race at Martinsville. So Martinsville, we got ourselves the classic paperclip short track here. It's going to be the final race of the current round of the playoffs for each series. All 3 series are having elimination races this week. So we're also using the short track rules package. The big storyline to watch here, particularly for Cup, NASCAR is introducing a new tire compound for left side tires inspired by the option tires that were used at both Richmond and North Wilkesboro. So NASCAR, they'll be hosting an extended practice session for the Cup Series as a result of that this week, so the teams could get some data and basically figure out how they could utilize these tires and how they can make setups work for this car there. That's the big storyline there. Mark, you only knew about this just before we went on air here to talk about the story. This caught you off guard. So what are your first thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, my first inclination, I didn't necessarily catch this and prepping. Obviously, it's earlier in the week, but one thing I will say is this would indicate to me that NASCAR is trying to see a little bit more parity in the race, probably looking to see some drivers unexpectedly catch some flats, not properly managing their tires throughout the race. So maybe looking at more veterans than some of the younger guys here. So that's my first instinct. And then also one thing I will say is I would imagine there's going to be some better DFS contests that are offered next week. So given this tire element to this race, given the aggressiveness that we're going to see from some of these drivers, generally speaking, my DFS strategy is to go a little bit lighter with my bankroll. I'm still going to play all 3 races, but I'm just going to go lighter than normal in anticipation that I'll go heavier next week for our final week.
So we know that Martinsville in the past couple of races, they've been more track position based races where, simply put, if you're right towards the front, you're going to stay there. So we've seen a lot of long stretches of dominators just going out there and leading the entire race, picking up on laps led like that. I mean, we were discussing it before the show even about how the last 2 fall races, we've only had about maybe 2 drivers at a time lead 100 plus or even 200 plus laps. So dominators are going to be the name of the game at this race because there is an extremely high lap count for the Cup Series race this week. 500 laps up for grabs. So how are you going to attack it?
Yeah, we have to go after dominators. I think you got to try to target 2 dominators, at least in your lineup. And it's likely going to be, in my opinion, you're looking at the playoff drivers. So one of those individuals, and how these guys qualify will dictate who I'm targeting. I do want to save a little bit of money at dominators because I think there's a lot of guys that qualify for that type of role in this race specifically. One thing to keep in mind, if you're looking at it from a betting perspective, we've seen 4 straight, I think, Martinsville wins where the drivers came from outside the top 10. So even though, going in line with what you're saying, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement. We're looking at that track position. If you're looking at outright winners, worth a shot on targeting some guys that might not be starting in the top 10 to actually knock down the whole race. I mean, we saw William Byron go from 18th to 1st here earlier this year. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And we can still see some decent place differential as well.
Yeah, but you notice about all these drivers that have won and have been in the field, have been in some of the top equipment of the field as well, too. So
Yep.
We've known drivers have said that this track definitely requires a little bit of talent in order to be good at. But how much do you think the equipment factor is gonna matter for this week's race?
I would imagine a lot. I mean, maybe we see a driver or 2 that decides to do one of those engine switches and start from the back and just, but because they're in good equipment, can work their way all the way up. So that could change the whole approach to this race. I think equipment certainly matters here on a track like this, and how well the driver can manage and identify issues when they crop up is going to be everything. So that's kind of where I'm looking at maybe some more of the veterans, the more experienced drivers, particularly on this track, for some of my DFS lineups, because they'll be able to manage the wear on tires with the new package that we're going to be utilizing.
Good call. Good call. Let's get into the notables and part-timers list for all 3 series now. Let's start with the trucks here. Driving the #1 Tricon Garage Toyota truck is William Sawalich this week. We have Dylan Lupton in the 02 truck for Young's Motorsports. Brett Moffitt, as mentioned, is in that 4 truck this week. Interesting to see him back. Norm Benning is in the 6. Connor Zilich is in the Spire Motorsports #7. That could be an entry to watch. Landon Lewis is going to be in the 16 here. Clayton Green is going to be in the 22. Matthew Gold is in the #44 for Nice Motorsports. We have Caden Honeycutt in the #45 once again. Johnny Sauter is going to be in the 66. That could be another interesting entry. As is Corey Day in a 3rd Bill McAnally entry, the #81, while we have Justin Carroll in the 90 and Jack Wood in the #91. In the Xfinity Series, we have Patrick Emmerling in the 07 and Greg Van Alst in the 14, both for SS Greenlight Racing. Dylan Lupton is doing double duty. He's in the 15 for AM Racing. William Sawalich is back in the #19, another driver doing double duty, this time for Joe Gibbs Racing. Eric Almirola is in the 20. Bubba Pollard's in the number 26 for Sam Hunt Racing. That's a very interesting name to mention right there. Short track driver there. Carson Ware is in the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports, with Garrett Smithley is in the number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing. That could be an interesting value right there. Preston Pardis is in the number 50. Mason Maggio is in the number 53. Logan Bearden is in the number 74. Myatt Snyder is back in the number 91 for DGM Racing. And then the other DGM entry, the number 92, will be driven by Dawson Cram. In the Cup Series, we have Kaz Gralla in the number 15 for Rick Ware Racing. He gained positive place differential in the Martinsville race earlier in the year. Shane Van Gisbergen is back for his first short track race in the Cup Series there, in the number 16 Colleague Racing Machine. And then Josh Bilicki is in the number 66 mark. So that's our list right there. Okay, so before we get into our driver picks, just wanted to remind everybody out there watching and listening that we are a part of FantasyGuru.com. We're part of the racing team over there. And you can also get any of the packages, once again, like the Game Time MVP All-In package, which includes NBA and all of their sports, but football and baseball for one price. We have the promo going on right now where if you use the code BOO, you can get $100 off of DFS, betting, or all-in NFL packages from FantasyGuru.com. That's use the code BOO for Halloween right there. And other than that, you can hit up support at FantasyGuru.com in order to get the best possible deals you can get of any of the packages we mentioned today, or any of the other DFS or betting packages that's Fantasy Guru offers on their website. So hit up support, and we'll go on from there. And we're going to have this up during Halloween week, so you could say we have some tricks and treats right there, Mark. How about it? Huh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got to give it up to the NBA team. I had a 50K hit, so I won 50 grand last night playing an NBA DFS lineup. So I can attest personally, I play most of the sports outside of NASCAR. I also had a $50,000 hit in NFL a month ago. So I've made six figures in the last 45 days, just consuming content that all of our analysts work super hard to do the research in and put in the time in to provide good quality content. And then ultimately, it's still up to me to create the lineup. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you look at my NBA lineup last night, half of my guys were guys that Fensty wrote up in his article that day. So big shout out to them. Our NBA team's crushing it. That season just started. This is an excellent deal that we're going to be able to take advantage of. And there's plenty more wins to come here moving forward.
Oh, I'm sure. And we're going to hope to deliver to people some wins playing NASCAR for this week. Let's get right on into it, and let's talk about our top price picks to watch there, Mark. So looking at our list over here, there is a little bit of overlap that we have overall for this week. We're both in on Ryan Blaney because, I mean, Blaney, he's the defending winner of this race. We know he's going to be driving with a chip on his shoulder just because he was disappointed with how this last week's race at Homestead played out. But you also got Chase Elliott and William Byron. I also like those drivers too this week. But why don't you tell the viewers out there a little bit more about those two? Why do you like them over the others?
Yeah, I mean, Chase Elliott, first of all, when I'm looking at some of these top tier drivers, I kind of mentioned it earlier, but we have a lot of guys vying for these top spots, but the price points are depressed here on DraftKings. So, Chase Elliott, he's $10,500. So a relatively cheaper driver in this top price range. When you look at short tracks, I mean, Chase Elliott, we saw him finish second at Bristol, ninth at Richmond, third at Iowa, third at Martinsville earlier this year, and then fifth at Richmond at the beginning of the year. Even Bristol again with eighth at the beginning of the year. So, we're talking about finishing in the top 10, if not the top 5 for the majority of these short track races. I also love the momentum. I mean, he looked really fast last week. He was, competing. He recorded lead laps. He also has out of all drivers in the next gen car, second most lead laps over the course of his track record amongst the rest of the group here, only behind Denny Hamlin. So I think he's going to be a lower owned option that can easily be a dominator and also win this race. Same thing. I mean, William Byron, he's got 2 wins here. So we just saw him, I think earlier this year, go from, 18th to first place at Martinsville. So another guy that we can see push on the short track. And then what I love about all of these guys, they're playoff drivers, like I said before. So we're going after guys that are looking to not only get a win, but get stage points, knock down a bunch of lead laps, stay at the front, make sure they do everything they possibly can not to lose track position. These are the guys I'm going after for some of my dominators.
I like it. I do think that you have to have some Hendrick Motorsports drivers within your lineups this weekend. Hendrick has an incredible history at this track. We saw it earlier this year when they finished 1, 2, 3 at Martinsville. And you know what? One of those drivers there that you didn't mention was Kyle Larson. So Kyle, he's also won at Martinsville before in the past as well. He's had some really good statistics at this track. And the last 4 races in the next gen car at Martinsville, 3 finishes a second or better, including a win in the April 2023 event. He's also led in 3 of the last 4 Martinsville races and scored a driver rating of over 100 in each of those races as well. So considering that Larson's on the cut line there, he's a driver that I have my eye on too, especially because, his season's on the line. He's got to go for it or go home. And the same that can be said about Denny Hamlin. You mentioned it earlier there. This is one of Denny's top tracks, historically speaking, in the Cup Series overall. And even going forth and looking back towards his last couple of finishes, he's led in each of the last 4 races, driver rating of over 100 in the last 4 races. And that includes 3 top 5 finishes within the last 4 races. So, I mean, Hamlin, he's led over 150 laps in the last 2 fall Martinsville races, both combined. I'm just saying that Hamlin, he needs to have a good race. His season is on the line here. And Joe Gibbs Racing, they're usually really good at this track. They won this particular race 2 years ago with Christopher Bell. I could see Hamlin pulling out a potential win and getting into that competitive spirit once again this week.
I think there's going to be ownership will be under control with Hamlin too, because there's going to be a lot of people buying into the kind of choke artist narrative here. So, I mean, look, the numbers say otherwise. So he looked really good last week, as long as he doesn't have any kind of mental lapse. The one thing I will say about Hamlin, and I think this is actually a strategy to keep in mind in general this weekend, is he's probably going to take a contrarian strategy given where he stands in the playoff standings, and we see him take contrarian strategies pretty consistently. And I would imagine all of the guys on the bubble might end up taking an alternative strategy than the guys that like Christopher Bell, who might be a little bit more conservative, or a William Byron. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw like a Hamlin, Blaney, and Elliott all on like a different strategy from the rest of the group, which from a DFS perspective, I like trying to guess. I mean, we're not going to know for sure. It's very hard to determine how a race plays out specifically, but going with that type of picture that I'm painting, maybe you build a lineup around Hamlin, Blaney, and then Elliott, assuming they're all going to run the same strategy, and then maybe pick a few other guys that maybe are on the same team or something like that to complete those lineups and get something super contrarian out there.
I like the approach, though, especially because we know how these race scripts, it's kind of like game scripts from the NFL, but we're talking about it in the matter of racing, so we'll call them race scripts. It's going to be all about the playoffs for these drivers there. And if you're like, say, a Christopher Bell, where you have a bit of a points cushion, you're not going to go all out. You're just going to try your best to assure your points position and maybe just finish top 10. Whereas if you're William Byron or anybody else below that cut line, you're going to have to perform, because in William Byron's case, sure, he has the point advantage a little bit over Kyle Larson, and maybe he just would only need to finish maybe top 5 to guarantee his spot. If anybody from below that cut line ends up winning this race, then Byron has to outpoint Christopher Bell, and that's gonna really put him in a hole right there, because Christopher Bell has like about maybe a 22-point advantage over Byron as well. So that's a big difference maker right there as far as how these drivers are going to play out this race there.
Even qualifying is going to be intense. You have the extended practice, everything. There's a lot of elements to all of this leading up to the race that is going to impact what the slate looks like even.
100%. Qualifying is everything when it comes to Martinsville too, because if you start right at the front, Martinsville is not a track where it's easy in order to make passes as well too, unless your car is just really that much better. Because what we have to keep in mind is that because of how little room the track provides, you're going to have to use the bumper in order to move somebody out of the way, or just get them in a bad spot with some traffic. And traffic is going to come into play because drivers are going. It's a short track. The leader's going to easily catch the back of the field. Drivers are going to go a lap down, and that affects the racing lanes right over there as well too. So when you're dealing with the traffic and that could block your line, that can make the drivers that are right behind the leader really catch up quick.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's really what we do have to keep in mind, though, the race conditions, and really keep an eye on pre-race events. Now, on that note, let's talk about our mid-tier drivers to watch over here. Looking at our list here, we do kind of match up, and 2 out of our 3 picks were both in on Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman there. I mean, Bubba and Bowman, they both have been having some pretty solid finishes for the price line as it is at Martinsville in recent years. And we talk about Alex Bowman. He's in Hendrick Motorsports Equipment. This is one of Hendrick's best tracks, and even if they're not going to go all in on Bowman because he's out of the playoffs compared to the other 3, he's still going to have a solid showing overall just because the equipment is just that good. Bubba's been pretty good as well at this track before, too. He likes racing at Martinsville in the past, and I don't see why he wouldn't be able to get another really solid run out of the deal, especially when he's been finishing around the 11th position or better in about like the last 4 races at this track in the next-gen car. Now, where we differ is that we're both on different Stewart-Haas racing drivers. And I'm not exactly against your pick there too, Mark. Tell us about why you're interested in Josh Berry.
So I think Chase Briscoe is a good pick as well. He's expensive for mid-tier, and I could see things going wrong potentially. So I wanted to go a little bit different and offer a play that's a bit low in ownership. Now, Josh Berry is the least favorite of my 3 mid-tier drivers, but for Josh Berry here, I mean, we've got him landing in 4 of the 6 short track races over the course of this season within the top 15. And he's been qualifying very well on these tracks as well. The other element to this is, unfortunately, at Martinsville earlier, he started in 7th and then finished in 25th. So we saw a disappointing finish earlier this season. And that's the only data that we're operating off of for Martinsville with Berry. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of people in the industry who are going to overlook him, despite overall what his short track record has looked like this season. And then we're going to end up getting very low ownership on a guy that, if he does pay off, which it's a risk, we might see single-digit ownership on a $7,300 driver, and potentially, we're looking at potentially 35, 40 points. So I like it. I think it's a great way to get a little bit different. Maybe everyone goes Briscoe. Something happens to him. He's on the same team, so probably going to be running a similar strategy. So you could even take the approach of just putting both in your lineup, and then that's where your value comes into play across the board, and then you just fill the rest with your dominators as well.
That's true. Now, Josh Berry, I'm going to mention this too because I don't think enough people talk about this, but he comes from a short track modified racing background as well. So short tracks are what fit his driving style best, more than any other track type. So I don't mind the Josh Berry call at all, especially if he ends up qualifying in the middle of the pack, unlike the top of the pack earlier in this year, which made it a little bit harder for me to recommend him overall if he does do that. But I like Chase Briscoe a little bit more overall at this particular track, just because Briscoe, he's been really consistent at this track in the past as well. He's been top 10 in each of the last 5 Martinsville races. He's also led in 3 of the last 4 Martinsville events, including 8 laps earlier in the year. I know that Josh Berry and Chase Briscoe, their average finish on short tracks in their entire Cup career so far to this point since about 2021, they're very similar. Now, Berry edges out Briscoe with a 14.3 versus a 15.4, but that's very close. And Briscoe, he has a little bit more experience with this car, a little bit more experience with this particular track in a Cup car. So I lean towards Briscoe just because also the price line that he's a little bit up there too. I do think that is going to scare some people off of him too, because he's not going to offer as much flexibility that, say, Josh Berry does. And when you look towards his qualifying results, well, for Chase Briscoe, even though he generally does qualify very well at Martinsville, he does have one race. Well, he actually has 3 single starts, one of them in the next gen car, where he has qualified outside the top 10 too. So it's not out of the question where Briscoe can maybe not qualify the best as well. But even if he does qualify up there, he could look good in practice, and he does really feel out the short tracks as well, like Josh Berry too. So he could be a sneaky tournament play in that circumstance.
Maybe they qualify around the same spot, which would entice me even more to run a combo and just put them in the same lineup and then do a couple, NASCAR stacks is what we like to call them.
That's true. And you remember, we saw it in the truck race this past weekend as well, where there was not a lot of place differential movement. I think particularly for the Cup race, we can see something like that as well happen here too, where some of the drivers, they maybe qualify like just towards the back half of the top 10, and then they end up finishing there too. And that still makes them worth it in a tournament lineup because they're going to carry that low ownership. So That's something to keep in mind here too when we talk about drivers like Briscoe and Berry.
Oh yeah, love it.
So let's get into our sleepers and value plays for this week's race. So again, we basically almost entirely overlap. We're both in on Ryan Preece, and we're both in on the Todd father, Todd Gilliland. I mean, that's pretty much, in my opinion, those are the 2 best value picks that you can get pretty much there below that 7K range there when you're between 6 and 7K. I think they're the 2 best options without question. Ryan Preece, he is a modified short track racer as well. This is one of the very, very few tracks where he displayed a performance that was capable of even winning a Cup Series race in the past. So he tends to really enjoy this racetrack. He has a lot of experience even outside of NASCAR at this track. Stewart-Haas Racing, they tend to favor the short tracks as well. So those drivers, you can expect some good results from them. And then when you look towards Todd Gilliland, he's surprisingly had some pretty nice finishes as well in Martinsville, with 3 top 20 finishes in 5 starts, including a 10th place finish in this race 1 year ago there, Mark. So what do you think about Preece and Gilliland? Anything to add on with those 2 here?
Well, when I look at it strictly from a Vegas perspective, for example, Ryan Preece, he's, I think this was on Caesars, head to head. He was a minus 115 favorite to finish higher than, I think it was like Austin Cindric or something like that. But we're seeing him as like minus, favorites to beat head to head drivers on multiple occasions, which you normally don't see out of a value driver like this. So I think it's just another strong indicator to add to all of your points that the books also agree that there's definitely something to Ryan Preece going into this race at his price point. Yeah, he's probably going to be chalky. That's the one thing to keep in mind. And generally what I like to do in NASCAR is opposite of NFL, where I like to try and eat the chalk at towards the top end of the price points and then do some contrarian plays towards the bottom. So, my selection of Priest is ultimately going to come down to what type of contest I'm entering in, what my goal is to what I want to win coming out of this Cup race. But I like Priest. And then Gilliland I'm okay with. I'm not like overly ecstatic with, but we are seeing some nice finishes with him coming out of Martinsville. So, went from 16th and finished 13th earlier this year. 17th to 10th back in 2023 in October, and then did have a disappointing one finish in April of 2023, going from 13th to 25th, but then another Martinsville race in 2022, starting 19th and finishing 13th. So on average, we're seeing him increase place differential relatively nicely and at a very low price point. I rounded it out with Corey LaJoie, and not even intentionally from a veteran driver standpoint, but I do think an older driver might make sense at the very bottom of your pricing and allows you to pay up for maybe that extra dominator spot that you're looking to, fill your lineups here with. I think LaJoie is interesting. It has to set up right for me. The way I look at it, all of the books are setting him at finishing around the 26th position. So at his price point, if we have him start around 32, maybe 33, and see him work his way up to the 26th or the 25th position, he'll pay off pretty well there. So, that's kind of just my bottom of the barrel, going after a dirt cheap driver that is a veteran that might be able to work through with the different tire packages and give us some nice results and pay off at the price point.
Not bad. I didn't really have LaJoie on my radar as much because his results have been a little bit mixed in Martinsville. But I do think, though, that he can be worth a shot, like you said, if he does start deep enough. Now, one driver that I think people are not going to pay attention to, that I think people may want to this week, is the last driver on my list, and that's Harrison Burton. Just even me mentioning Harrison Burton is not something I do very often on this podcast, especially in a positive DFS light right there. But the numbers do not lie when it comes to Harrison Burton. 5 races at Martinsville, positive place differential every single time, which is wild when you really think about it. Even if it is, well, actually, no, not every single time, 4 out of the 5 times, because he went from 26th to 29th in April 2022. His one time that he didn't was the October race in 2022, where he started 10th but finished 11th. Then the next 3 races started 32nd, finished 29th. Then started 28th, finished 15th. Then started 34th and finished 33rd this year. Even if it's one position, it still counts. And also the other thing, too, which I think people are also not talking about, was within the last 5 races this year, Harrison Burton has earned positive place differential in 4 out of the 5 races, all at different track types. So really, I mean, Harrison's trying to close out the year pretty strongly, and he also has 2 top 20 finishes within the last 3 races. So something to really watch, because this is this sort of track where Burton, he can maybe get some place differential, and that's about as much as you can ask when you get about towards a driver about as cheap as he is. He's just slightly more than Corey LaJoie by $100. So whether you want to go with Burton or LaJoie, I think if you're going down that deep, that's who you should end on. But Harrison Burton on FanDuel is way cheaper than Corey LaJoie. He's $2,500 compared to LaJoie at $3,800. So something to keep in mind depending on which site you play on.
Yeah, another thing to add too is I'm starting to notice a trend where these dirt cheap drivers, typically you don't even have to look at the track record matters, but the recent momentum is probably a better indicator as far as what they might do in this race as far as place differential goes, because that's really all you're chasing with these types of drivers. So both have nice momentum. I think both are going to be very low owned, and that falls in line with my strategy and getting different towards the bottom and eating the chalk at the top.
100%. And I think Harrison Burton, first of all, because, well, he has the name recognition where he's not considered that good by most NASCAR purists out there. But really though, this is one of the very few tracks where I think you can actually make use of him for DFS. I think he's going to carry well below average ownership as a result. And then that right there, that could be a key towards winning.
I love it.
Let's quickly get into our core fours to close out the show here. Let's get into our betting winners here. I'll go first. I have Kyle Larson at plus 400, Denny Hamlin at plus 400, Ryan Blaney at plus 600, and then Chase Elliott at plus 800. My long shot in order to win, and this is because I think his history has just been pretty solid and he has been close before, Chase Briscoe at plus 2,200. But I do also want to shout out Ryan Paris's odds because he is way down deep there as far as outright winning there. He's at plus 9,000 in order to win. Absolutely crazy, too.
I think he led a bunch of laps at one point. What was it, last year? And then he faced like a penalty or something. I forget what the deal was with him at Martinsville previously, but
the April 2023 event where he led 135 laps, had an issue on pit road that relegated him to 15th.
There you go. So it's possible. It's certainly possible. I had Byron at plus 800, Elliott at plus 800. I went with Hamlin just because I hadn't really listed him as a guy that would be in my DFS core, but certainly looking at him in all capacities as well. And then Ryan Blaney at plus 600. I did want to throw out one creative strategy that I think is plausible here. And that is, we've got 2 weeks left. So think about some guys that could win this race, and also think about some guys that if they win this race could win the championship. So, for example, maybe you have much better odds on like a Ryan Blaney, right? So Blaney is plus 600 to win this race, but he's plus 2,800 to win the Cup Series championship.
Ooh,
I'd prefer to
that.
so maybe take Blaney at plus 2,800 and then take, someone else that you think could win this race that has worse odds for this one, like a Byron or an Elliott or something like that. So, take advantage, buy the better odds just by placing the slightly different bet, knowing that if they win this race, they're going to have a shot at winning the championship race as well.
Oh, 100%. That's a great call out right there, Mark. 100%.
And because what will happen too is once that driver does win, then you're looking at like plus 400 odds for them to win the championship at that point, and you lose all of that value. So you might as well go after the higher yielding option and then spread out your picks this week over the course for the championship and this week's race, knowing that you're going to get the best value right now.
Definitely, for sure. That's a great call out right there. I might have to make that Blaney bet after we're done with the show here.
Yeah, I mean, he's one. And then, if you look at it, like Chase Elliott is plus 4,000, right? So, like, I don't mind taking Blaney and Elliott to win the championship. Elliott is a streaky driver, but he does seem like he's hitting his stride at the right time. So, you could even take Hamlin at plus 2,000. You take those three guys and then you fill out your odd, maybe two more bets since you got such high yielding bets with those three for this race, and adding in like a Byron and a Larson or something like that. And then you cover practically all of your playoff drivers, which with high yielding results here.
Great strategy. I'm going to have to make use of that one. Let's finish out with our DFS core fours here. So my DFS core four, I have Ryan Blaney at 11K on DK, 13K on FD, Bubba Wallace at 7,800 on DraftKings, and 10,000 on FanDuel. Alex Bowman at 7,700 and FanDuel at 8,500. And then Todd Gilliland at 6,600 and FanDuel at 6,500. I like all four of those drivers a lot. You can play around and maybe even get one potential top dominator like Hamlin or something with how much money that's left over with these four, and maybe somebody like a Burden in order to round out your lineup. But give us your DFS core four, Mark. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I got something very similar. I got Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman as well. And then I also got Chase Elliott on DK's $10,500, so a little bit cheaper amongst all the playoff drivers. And then FanDuel 12,500. And then to round it out, very similar as far as value plays goes, but Ryan Preece at 6,900 on DK and 6,800 on FanDuel. So it was 6,800. Does that sound right? I thought he might have been 3,800. I could be no. That's LaJoy. Never mind. So he's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, but at DK, I'm much more willing to pay that price point. In general, though, love both of those cores, and I think both of them can work out just fine. They give you plenty of room to get creative to build out the rest of your lineup as well.
In fact, actually, I was going to say they leave almost the same exact amount of salary left over between both, too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep.
You can already make two different lineups just with that approach, those approaches alone. So, it works.
Oh, yeah. Love it.
All right. That'll do it for this week's Race Guru Thunder Hour. Hope you all enjoyed our NASCAR content and our little overview of the weekend ahead. So be sure to like, subscribe, leave us comments here on the YouTube if you're watching it there, or hit us up on the Discord. If you're listening to the show, let us know how we're doing, what strategies you may be taking in the Fantasy Guru Discord. And, well, may you all have some great luck there, and let's hope to see the winners in victory lane this week. What do you say, Mark?
Let's make some money this weekend. Good luck, everyone.
All right. That'll do it for the Race Guru Thunder Hour. Find me at Shawnee247. Find Mark Hogan fishing out the victories at DFS Marlin. That'll do it for this week. Peace.